Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Harris. With me, of course, is Kyle Yates. You can find us on Twitter at DanHarris80 and at KyleYNFL. Yates, I usually start by asking you how you doing, but I want to talk about how you doing. That's, we friends it always, no matter what, when we talk. But I want to talk about how I'm doing today because I'm doing really well. Would you like to know why, Yates?
I would love to know why.
I'm glad. I was going to tell you regardless of your response to that question. I have just found out that there is I don't think it's a reboot. It's like a sequel to Saved by the Bell that's starting in a few weeks. So I ask this, of course, because we tease you about your age and tease you good-natured. I mean, you are in the prime of your life. I'm old and decrepit, so it's positive.
The prime of lime?
Have you ever seen Saved by the Bell?
I have not, actually.
Okay. I'm going to give you right now 3 reasons why it was perhaps the greatest television show of all time. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Number 1, the show actually begins in junior high school in, I believe, Indiana, and then they are magically transported to California with only a fraction of the same crew remaining, and it is never explained. And you can't get away with that unless you're the best show ever. Number 2, a major high school in a major city in California revolves around only the same 6 people, regardless of what happens. Just 6 people until the very end, where 2 of the characters are magically transported away and never explained, and a new one comes in for like the final 8 episodes. Number 3, the main character is able to freeze time simply by saying the words timeout and making a timeout signal. So with all that, Yates, are you ready now to go back and binge watch the original Saved by the Bell?
I mean, I have to after that description, don't I? You put a lot of time into thinking about that.
I'm not joking. I'm hoping that our guest today is going to back me up on this. If not, there's pretty much nothing I can do about it, so we're just going to go on with the show. But our guest today is somebody who I have been waiting to talk to for a really, really long time. It's Kate Magdziuk, co-owner of Ball Blast Football. You can find her on Twitter at FFBallBlast. Kate, thank you for coming on, and please give me a 6-minute description of your feelings on Saved by the Bell.
Oh my God. Yates, unacceptable. That has been the staple of my entire childhood. I envision us as around the same age.
Yes.
But basically TBS, I think it was TBS.
It was.
When I was in 7th grade, used to play reruns every single morning. So I would get up at like 6 a.m. and I would just watch Saved by the Bell until I was inevitably late and missed my bus. And then,
You know what you should have done, Kate? You should have you should have done timeout and
I should have done timeout. I would have never missed the bus. But oh my goodness. The only thing that I will say is watching it in retrospect, which I have, like I love to go back and watch Saved by the Bell. Just it's a time warp. It's absolutely a time warp. It's sort of like all of these lessons that you learn in the cheesiest of ways. But man, have you seen the videos on, I think it's a Facebook account, about why Zach Morris is the worst?
Yes.
Because they're all very accurate. And come to realize that Zach Morris really is the worst main character of all time of any television show. And you realize it's all about Kelly Kapowski.
I'm equally excited by the fact that you revere the show in the same way I do, and disappointed by the fact that you accurately quoted the Zach Morris is the worst account, which is fantastic and also accurate, unfortunately. But okay, look, we've actually got football to talk about, but Yates, your homework assignment is to go watch Saved by the Bell.
And then we can start like a Saved by the Bell fantasy league. I think that's the next step.
Totally in for that, Kate. Like, out of the way, everybody else. This is all we're doing going forward. But in the meantime, we'll talk some fantasy football. We are going to start, as we often do on this Tuesday show, by breaking down last night's game between Yates's Chicago Bears and the Rams. Then we're going to be talking about some trades, most traded players, things like that. We'll go buy low, sell high. We'll talk about some rest of season risers and fallers. And then we will close with a listener mailbag where we have a lot of good questions. First, before we get into it, let me remind you about our monster giveaway. It is October 27th today as we record this. The giveaway ends on October 31st at 11:59 p.m. The giveaway is monster. It is a signed black and gold Aaron Jones Packers helmet, a $200 gift card from Pristine Auction, a $200 gift card to Porter Road Butcher, a package of fantasy football goods for your league's champion and your last place loser from Trophy Smack, and it is a 1-month subscription to Fubo TV. You can enter by either following us on Instagram at Fantasy Pros, following us on Twitter at Fantasy Pros, or subscribing to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/fantasypros. Then go to fantasypros.com/contest and enter the giveaway. You have a couple more days. That's it, fantasypros.com/contest. All right, let's start with the Rams 24, Bears 10. For the Rams, your leading receiver in terms of targets and yards for the Rams is Josh Reynolds, who sees 8 targets, 4 catches, 52 yards, and a score. Cooper Kupp catches all 6 of his targets for 43 yards. He had 16 yards rushing. Robert Woods catches 3 of his 5 targets for just 22 yards. He has 23 yards rushing, but he does lose a fumble. Kate, let me start with you. Is there anything to read into the fact that Josh Reynolds had, a much more expanded role than usual into the passing game?
Honestly, I wasn't particularly shocked. Just based on the fact that we did have Tyler Higbee inactive. We knew that was going to shake up something. But the Bears defense is not a pushover defense at this point. I think because they are the Bears, sorry, Yates, they just sort of carry this reputation of being bad. But their defense is still a top-end defense. So I think we had to expect that, we were going to see some trickery, some diversion from their typical plan. Sean McVay knows how to game plan. This is what he's built for. This is what his brain is built for. So I think that was just a little workaround from Sean McVay, because they're not, Josh Reynolds hasn't been a part of this offense in large. The Bears likely weren't game planning for that. So I think it was a smart move.
So you don't expect then a bigger role. You don't think this is a precursor to a bigger role from Reynolds going forward?
Nope. I think this was Sean McVay, genius, boy wonder, making some moves.
How about you, Yates? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm with Kate here. That looking at the offense here, Josh Reynolds is not a huge part of this offense, and I think that it is a brilliant. Looking at the sides from Matt Nagy to Sean McVay, the difference between the coaching, and we'll get to Matt Nagy, but the difference between the coaching was just night and day. It was drastically different, and Sean McVay is a genius. He does know how to scheme up these things. So we've also seen Van Jefferson be involved in this offense. I don't know if he was injured or what his status was. He wasn't involved last night at all. So I just think this is a one-time thing. Let's not read too much into it. And but looking forward, I do expect Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp to get back to being the focal points of this offense.
Do we read anything into Gerald Everett finding the end zone here? 4 catches for 28 yards. Of course, Kate, as you mentioned, Tyler Higbee was out. I mean, is either one of these tight ends going to be rosterable and or startable going forward, Kate?
I think you have to play this out and see what is Tyler Higbee's status moving forward. I was a little surprised. I know he popped up on the injury report late last week. I was a little surprised to see him actually be inactive. I unfortunately had him in a couple of slots where Gerald Everett was not there, but I just wasn't anticipating that. I think the best case scenario for either of these from a fantasy standpoint is if one of them is inactive, and I think that's your only green light to play either of these guys at this point. I was one of the biggest Tyler Higbee stans going into the season, but the usage just hasn't been there. It hasn't been consistent enough. But to play devil's advocate, what are we hoping for these tight ends? Because 9 times out of 10, your top 10 tight ends have been, on waivers and dynasty leagues, because they're just that far deep into the depth chart. So, God, shoot your shot, do what you can. But I think we're in a tough spot with these guys.
Yeah, Yates, you and I have talked about Tyler Higbee before and essentially said that, given where we are at tight end, he's droppable if you need to. And I assume that this game, despite the fact that Gerald Everett finds the end zone here, even if Higbee were inactive, Everett wouldn't be somebody who you would be targeting, right?
Yeah, it didn't change much in my perception. So, like Kate said, if one of these guys is inactive, then you can roll out them as a desperation play. But outside of that, man, I'm really just trying to avoid this tight end group.
For the running game for the Rams, Darrell Henderson, 15 for 64 on the ground, plus 2 for 13 through the air. Malcolm Brown finds the end zone here, 10 carries, 57 yards with the score. Cam Akers, I believe, got 2 snaps. So let's start with the easy one. Kate, is Cam Akers droppable?
Yep.
Yates.
He has not found the field. It's not even like he's gotten the opportunity. So you have to just wonder what are they seeing in practice? I'm not sure.
Yates.
Yeah, he was droppable a couple weeks ago.
Correct. That's right. Not even, I have to ask it every week because every week people are like, oh, do I drop? The answer is always yes. Whoever you're looking to add, the answer is yes. Is Darrell Henderson a starter for you as an RB2 every week going forward, Kate?
Yes, he absolutely is. And I think it's, sort of like the tight end situation. When you've got talent on multiple sides of the field, and, you've got Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson, who are, some different type runners. Darrell Henderson is so explosive. I think that you have to bank on that explosivity to maybe get you just like a nice long touchdown or, make some nice moves in the passing game. I think his upside is high enough for me, just having watched him on the field, that I'm a believer. I feel comfortable starting him. But like counterpoint, Malcolm Brown also looked great last night and has looked great on and off. So, but I think out of all of these backs, Henderson definitely has the highest upside for me.
Would you still essentially consider Malcolm Brown a guy who you can also roll out there as a flex pretty much weekly, Kate?
He's a riskier bet for me. We every time we sort of lay down the land and think we understand this backfield, Sean McVay ruins our lives and tells us, no, we do not, which is brilliant because that's probably what he's doing to opposing coaching staff coaching staffs. So that's great for Sean McVay. But, I think Henderson, in addition to having the higher ceiling, has the safer floor for me. But Malcolm Brown, I don't think you can rule him out for a touchdown like he had this week, any given week. I think you just have to accept that the floor is low, but God, everybody's floor is so low right now. And at this point, we just need to put a starting roster together.
Yeah. We have a joke that we kind of say every week, which is like, how do you feel about this running back? And the answer is always like, I don't like him. I don't want to start him. I don't feel good about him. Where do you have him ranked this week? 22nd, because that's where we are at the running back position. Yates, go ahead, break down how you feel about both Henderson and Brown going forward.
Yeah, it's worth noting that Henderson, I think, left this game last night too for a bit with an injury. So, and I think,
I think he came back in.
He did come back in, but okay. I think when he left was when Malcolm Brown got his touchdown. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'll go back and look at that later, but. Yeah, I think that moving forward, Henderson is the guy to roster. I was absolutely desperate in a couple spots for this past week's matchups, and I was looking at my waiver wire, and Malcolm Brown was sitting there. And I was like, well, I'm going to roll the dice. It was either Malcolm Brown or Leonard Fournette. And so I was like, all right, I'll plug in Malcolm Brown. And it worked out. Like Kate said, desperation, flex guy that you just kind of pick up as a bye week fill-in and just hope that he scores. Otherwise, I'm not really looking to plug him into my lineup.
All right, let's go to the Bears here. And Kate, if it's okay, yeah, we do. And Kate, if it's okay with you, I'm going to go to Yates to start off with.
I think that's a good idea.
I've just got to do it. Look, Allen Robinson here, he totals 70 yards on 4 receptions. He's in the concussion protocol right now, so I don't think there's much for us to do right now. Hopefully it's okay. Let's go to the running game, though, Yates. Dave Montgomery, 14 for 48 on the ground, but he saves his fantasy value, at least in half PPR, full PPR leagues. Catches all 5 of his targets for 21 yards. How do you feel about Dave Montgomery going forward, Yates?
I mean, Montgomery has the chance to be really, really good. As far as a talent perspective, I really like him. He's a natural pass catcher out of the backfield, shows great patience behind the line of scrimmage, able to, and of course, his contact balance, breaking tackles. This is just not the offense for that skill set. This offense, with this offensive line, is get upfield as quickly as you can because it's going to, the gap that you're looking at is going to close real quick. So it's just... He's one of these guys that, again, when we're talking about freaking Malcolm Brown, we need to be talking about David Montgomery and his workload. So he's a safe RB2 every single week because of his involvement in the receiving game. But there were several times last night watching this game where it's the play call was a run right up the middle, right at Aaron Donald, one-on-one. And you're like, what are you doing? Do you not think that this is a terrible idea? Move David Montgomery to the other side of the formation or kick him outside. Do something to get away from Aaron Donald. And it was just the game planning, the play calling is just absolutely atrocious right now.
So we're going to talk about trades in a little bit, and we're not going to talk about Montgomery there because we're talking about him here. But I'm able to look at the most traded players for any league that has been incorporated into our My Playbook tool. every week I've looked at the top 10 players. Every single week that I've done it, David Montgomery is one of like the top 6 most traded players that week. And I think the reason is, and the reason I always offer in the article I write about it, is that I think if you roster David Montgomery, you like despise him, or you despise rostering him because you're like, there's such little upside at this point because of the offense necessarily. But if you don't roster him, you're like, oh my God, give me a guy who's going to get me 17 touches every week. That guy is gold. So Kate, how do you feel here about Montgomery going forward?
I think you have to accept his low ceiling and sort of eat it. Like if I'm in a league where I'm, like a borderline contender, these are the weeks where you really just, you need starting bodies. We're still in the middle of the trenches for bye weeks. He is a lock for all of these touches per game. Yep. I think that's really hard to turn down in the current atmosphere of the league right now. And I think that if you have, a couple of weapons on your starting roster that are maybe more tumultuous, like a Will Fuller or some of these really high ceiling guys, but that, have these low floors, I think he's a perfect addition for that kind of roster just to even things out, give you a nice safe floor for touches. You're not going to knock it out of the park, but your hope is going to be that one of these other pieces on your roster explodes and you just even things out.
Yeah, I always say you don't need to shoot the moon for every player on your fantasy roster. If you have explosive guys elsewhere, a guy like Montgomery is just going to kind of fill the gaps, is really worthwhile. Yates, do you have anything else that you want to talk about? Not that you want to talk about, but that you have to talk about from a fantasy perspective from the Bears? Because I didn't see much else to take away from this game.
I think a lot of people are going to have questions about Nick Foles, and not necessarily Nick Foles from a fantasy perspective, but Nick Foles and what it means for the other fantasy options on this roster. And granted, it's not much. It's Jimmy Graham and it's Allen Robinson that you really want to be looking at. The thing that is so frustrating is that you consistently see with this offense Matt Nagy slowing the tempo down, not willing to go, tempo, not willing to push and go into what is working. And Nick Foles, it has thrived on that, quote unquote 2-minute offense, the tempo, keeping up the pace and going with what's working. There was one point during the game last night. It was right when they, I think, went down 24-3 or something like that. They were first and goal or whatever, second and goal. And you can see Nick Foles gesture over to the sideline and he's doing his, tempo, like the hand gesture there. And then they're not moving. And you see Foles put his hands up in the air. Like, why aren't we moving? We're down 24-3 with 13 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Like, what are we doing? So I just think until the play calling changes, and I just don't know if Matt Nagy is going to give it up to someone like Bill Lazor's their offensive coach or offensive coordinator, I think. Until they do that, this offense is just not going anywhere. So hopefully they come out from this, travesty. It was just terrible to watch. And hopefully they make some adjustments. But until then, Allen Robinson gets a downgrade. Anthony Miller's not on the redraft radar. Darnell Mooney, nope. And Jimmy Graham gets a downgrade too.
Yeah, obviously there was that whole report from Greasy about whatever Foles may or may not have said about the play calling and not giving him time or whatever. But Kate, how about you? Because again, to me, really, I don't know. This is you're starting Allen Robinson every week, regardless of the quarterback at this point, and you're really not going too close to any other pass catcher. I don't know, Kate, if you had any other thoughts from last night.
No, I think that sums it up beautifully. I can't think of any coach that was sort of touted as an offensive mind that we were going to be so excited to see what he came up with, that has disappointed me more in recent years than Matt Nagy. He doesn't look like he is a very competent play caller. I don't think he is. And I think this is just really, he is the barrier, I think, for many of these guys, because I like David Montgomery's talent more than his box score would ever indicate. I don't think he's like a true RB1 by any stretch of the imagination, but I think he's a more than capable running back, and I think that there's a coach on the sideline shooting him in the foot before each and every game. So I think it's best, aside from Robinson and Montgomery, who are basically volume plays at this point. I love Allen Robinson, but the quarterback play, the offense just isn't there for the ceiling that you would hope to see with Allen Robinson. They're volume plays. And I think that's the best way to look at them moving forward. But yeah, not looking at any other options here, because I just don't think you can't trust these guys.
Yeah. To offer you a little bit of consolation, I have it on good authority that Adam Gase is going to be available going into next year. So shut up. If you want the upgrade. Okay, let's get to most traded players, guys. As I mentioned, we have our My Playbook where fantasy managers can import their leagues and get customized advice. And one of the things I can see is the individuals who have been traded the most during any set period of time. So what I like to do for this show is basically, since the games ended on Sunday until now, look at the most traded players list and maybe talk about them, and we can give some opinion on their rest of season rankings and all of that. And again, we have fantasypros.com/NFL/trade. That's not from My Playbook, but that does offer me the ability, and any fantasy manager, to see the most popular searches for individuals. That gives you a good sense of their value. So I will ask some of those. Let's start with two guys who I think it makes sense probably to talk about together, and that's Mike Evans and Antonio Brown. I want to start with Antonio Brown because I know Yates was already out on Mike Evans, and I follow Kate on Twitter, so I know that her Mike Evans takes are going to be pure fire. So I want to start with Antonio Brown first and ease our way into this. There's nothing really to analyze like we would normally based on performance, based on skill level, or anything like that. We know how good Antonio Brown could be. We haven't seen him on a football field, and that was only briefly in over a year. I have seen him traded for every range, and I'm going to give you some of these searches in a bit, and you can see sort of the different ranges that we're looking in. But I guess, Kate, going forward, how are you valuing Antonio Brown as of this moment?
I'm really not valuing him as a consistent option in any season-long format. He might be a guy that I'm going to plug into, some DFS. But I can't justify, especially, sort of at this critical time where we are in the year, to plug in this guy that we have not seen play football in a very long time. I'm not even sure that we're going to be noticing a significant fall in his play. He showed the ability last season to just hop onto the field and be immediately productive. This is a guy that Tom Brady clearly likes. I know everybody expects, some turmoil in the locker room at this point, but, I think he was actually relatively quiet when he was with New England, aside from these major allegations that were sort of his demise there. We weren't hearing, news out of the locker room that he's causing fights with teammates. We weren't hearing any of that. So I think we don't need to expect that, but he is a bolster for the Bucs' actual NFL roster. He boosts their opportunity, towards a Super Bowl win. But aside from that, he kills the value of just about every other asset in this team.
So I get two questions then, Kate. Number one, I don't know if you do, you keep up firm rest of season rankings or anything like that, but if you do, even if you don't, rough ballpark of where you think you'd have Brown roughly ranked if you were ranking receivers rest of season.
I would probably have him as a low-end wide receiver 2, high upside wide receiver 3.
Okay. All right. So that's actually higher than what I thought would you'd have him valued at, given kind of what you said about him. Number 2, let's avoid Mike Evans for the moment because we're going to talk about him separately. Do you think that this hurts Chris Godwin and or Rob Gronkowski?
Absolutely. I'm not so sure about Rob Gronkowski. I think we've really seen him acclimate to the offense a bit more. I think we're seeing, some of that. He just looks like a more natural football player at this point. I think he's looking more natural catching the ball than he maybe did right out of the gate, off of his retirement. He's building that rapport with Tom Brady. He's commanding more targets. So I'm not sure about him, but Chris Godwin, he's a guy that, obviously Tom Brady likes, but Tom Brady has been, begging for Antonio Brown to get there for a long time. And I don't think he's been advocating for that for no reason. He's not, I think he plans on involving him pretty significantly in the offense. And, like I said, a wide receiver 2, high upside wide receiver 3, I think that's where he'll finish. But I don't necessarily know that he's going to be like consistent enough on a week to week basis to do that. It's just, I think we do have to worry just about the volume because, Chris Godwin's a guy that's really flourished with volume. And I think, we might see that go to Antonio Brown at this point.
How about you, Yates? First, break down what you think of Brown as a fantasy option.
Yeah, so I have Brown at 45 in my rest of season rankings. So he's a flex play and surrounded by guys like Chase Claypool, Deebo Samuel, Cole Beasley, Laviska Shenault, Jerry Jeudy, Sterling Shepard. Those are the guys in that same range. So, of course, he comes with more upside, but yet we really don't know what his involvement in this offense is going to be. So I'm sitting here saying that he's at 45 right now. He can certainly move up. I am going to disagree and say that I think Chris Godwin's still going to be fine. Now, of course, he takes a slight downgrade, but yet at the same time, I think that he's still going to see the majority of the targets over the middle of the field. We've seen historically Brady just favor the middle of the field, targeting guys like Edelman, Gronkowski when he was in New England. Now he gets Godwin and Gronkowski. So Brown is there as sort of this spark plug, keeps defenses honest. I mean, good Lord, how are you going to stop this offense right now as a defense? You have Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Rob Gronkowski, Leonard Fournette out of the backfield, Ronald Jones. This is just a nightmare to try to defend. So, and of course, Tom Brady throwing them the ball. So I think Antonio Brown is going to be fine. He's someone that you can plug in as your flex and hope that he finds the end zone any given week. But of course, he does have the opportunity to move up in my rest of season rankings if we see something different on the field.
Brown is a really difficult player to rank. I'm just going to be as honest as possible that I don't have confidence wherever I would slot him in right now in my rest of season rankings for many reasons. Number one, he could be amazing. He really could be if he understands the offense and he's in shape and he stays on the field for the rest of the season, which I haven't seen too many people talking about that. I'm not willing to just accept that he is going to stay completely out of trouble and have no other issues and just be with the Bucs for the remainder of the season. I think that needs to be baked into his rest of season value when you're thinking about trades. But legitimately, guys, he is being traded all over the map. So
I can't wait. I can't wait. To
are you? Yeah. Trades. I mean, you're ready. He's either the number one player in fantasy football, or he is not worth rostering at this point, given the searches that I've seen. So I'm gonna just throw them out there. Some of them probably are going to be easy based on what both of you guys are saying, but I'm gonna throw it out there. These are the most popular trade searches. Kate, are you ready? And I just want you to know which way you're going on these. Ready?
I'm nervous. Yes, let's do it.
You should be nervous. It's cray-cray. Antonio Brown or Allen Robinson, Kate?
Goodness.
Allen Robinson.
Yeah. Yates, you're obviously taking Antonio Brown, right?
No.
No, right. You're taking it. Yes. We are not in the ballpark yet. I just want to throw that out there. I'm just going down, guys. Don't shoot the messenger.
Don't shoot the messenger,
okay? Right. Antonio Brown, Kate, or Michael Thomas?
Michael Thomas.
Yates.
Michael Thomas.
We are not in the ballpark yet. You are correct. Antonio Brown.
That was a real trade?
Okay. I can't confirm that these trades have been made. What I can confirm is that these trades are searched for in the let me compare these players and tell me whether or not this is a trade that I should make, which means they have been offered and fantasy managers are considering them. Correct. This is what I'm saying. Depending on what league you are in, you may be able to trade Antonio Brown for like a wide receiver 1, or as we will get to, you may not be able to trade him for a wide receiver 45 or worse. So let's see. Let's keep going. Antonio Brown or Kenny Golladay. I'm just going to assume that's an obvious Kenny Golladay, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Antonio Brown or Joe Mixon, even with the injury, I'm assuming that's an obvious Joe Mixon, right?
Correct.
Yep.
Antonio Brown, Kate, or Cooper Kupp?
Cooper Kupp.
Yates.
Kupp.
Antonio Brown or Darrell Henderson? Kate.
Henderson.
Yates.
Henderson.
We are all in agreement so far. Let's start to get a little closer. Antonio Brown or John Brown? Kate.
Antonio Brown.
Yates.
That one, I'll probably take Antonio Brown.
As would I. And Antonio Brown, final one, or CeeDee Lamb? Kate.
CeeDee Lamb.
Yates.
If you had asked me 2 weeks ago, that would have been CeeDee Lamb by a mile. Yep. It's still CeeDee Lamb for me, but that's a bit closer.
As of right now, I have Antonio Brown one spot higher than CeeDee Lamb, but I have been essentially running away from the Cowboys for like 2 weeks straight, and I just, every time I look at them in my rest of season rankings, I just keep moving. I mean, Ben DiNucci is almost certainly going to be throwing the ball this week, right?
Yep.
So I don't know. And I love CeeDee Lamb as a player. But for right now, I'd probably take the shot on Antonio Brown. But that is the range for me. But let's go to another receiver, as we talked about, who's going to be affected by Antonio Brown and might not have mattered based on how both of you guys have talked about him. Number of games played for Mike Evans is 7. The number of games with 2 catches or fewer for Mike Evans is 4. The number of games with 41 yards or fewer is 5. The number of games with 10 yards or fewer is 3. His value has been propped up by the 6 touchdowns. So let's start with you, Kate. 2-part question. Number 1, were you out on Mike Evans before the Antonio Brown signing? And number 2, on a scale of 1 to 11 billion, how out are you on him right now?
I was out before. He's a guy that I didn't even really draft heading into the season just because I didn't see really where he was going to fit in this entire offensive scheme. Just given Tom Brady and sort of the things that we've seen from him. I didn't get a lot of shares of Mike Evans in redraft leagues. The addition of Antonio Brown, good Lord, I'm out. I was out before. I can't be further out. I don't know if you guys watch Friends. Like, I'm so far across the line. The line is a dot to me at this point. I'm gone. I'm done.
If you're
I did tweet controversially. I don't know if did you guys see the Mike Evans tweet? Twitter burned down.
Oh, I saw it. Go ahead. Talk about it in case somebody hasn't. Go ahead.
No, I would absolutely love to. I feel like I need to stand up for myself here. So I tweeted yesterday that Mike Evans is droppable in redraft leagues, and the world burned. So I will say I had no idea that Mike Evans was regarded so highly in redraft leagues at this point, because I guess I assumed everybody else had seen the 2-yard, 41-yard, 10-yard, 37-yard performances. But if you guys didn't know, he's the wide receiver 20 on the season. But when almost half of your fantasy points have been made up on touchdowns, no thank you. I am so out. I'm so out. I am so out. And guess what? So the best part about if you were to drop Mike Evans, and it didn't even occur to me that he might be on a do not drop list. If you were to drop Mike Evans, I would love to see one of my league mates spend 100% of their fab on Mike Evans. I would love to see Mike Evans in their starting rosters moving forward, because you know what? You can try to bench Mike Evans, but you will be playing this weekly game of Russian roulette. Is this the week I plug him in? Yes. Okay, well, I got another 2-yard performance. Is this the week I bench him? Great, because he just had 122 receiving yards and a touchdown. That is what you're going to be doing for the rest of your season, is playing this game. And I'm just saying, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot more times than not.
Okay. First of all, I just saw something come across that said that Chris Godwin was out for week 8 because of a finger injury.
What?
I don't know.
Fractured his left index
fractured
finger.
his left index finger.
Making a touchdown catch.
And
Jeez.
he is out for week 8. Kate, how do you feel about
Mike
Mike Evans? With that, would you care to revise your statement, sir? I mean, does that
That is
change how you feel?
fantastic timing.
It's really remaining legitimately as we're
no,
talking.
it literally just came across.
Correct.
Wow, that's
okay.
that's
So
incredible timing.
no, hold on, legitimately, because I love this entire thing. I love this entire thing, and I will say, before we now get into the impact of Chris Godwin on both Brown and Mike Evans, very quickly. I think that your analysis of the situation is brilliant. Now, I'm not saying I would drop Mike Evans. I wouldn't. But I think the way you are thinking is sort of an underrated concept of fantasy football that I don't think enough fantasy managers think about. If you're out on a guy like Mike Evans, number one, if you drop him, if you can't trade him, of course, because perhaps somebody else is out there. If you drop him, somebody else is going to spend their entire amount of fab. And if you're truly out and you truly value somebody as if they're like, man, I don't want this guy and he's just going to hurt a fantasy team, then getting another manager to spend all of their fab on it is great. Number two, guys who you think are like too high end that you can't drop, but you're basically compelled to start them because of how they are, generally speaking, hurts your fantasy team. Because if you have Mike Evans, it's almost impossible not to start him because you're not going to be able to leave him on your bench. So basically being like, I want this guy off my roster, That is something. So I'm sorry, Kate has talked a lot, but I need her to talk now. Now that we know that Chris Godwin is out, Kate, against the Giants, what do you think right now about either Mike Evans or Antonio Brown? Does that change anything that you've said over the last few minutes?
In the coming week, I will definitely have Mike Evans in my top 10 for wide receivers. That definitely changes it. In the 3 games that Chris Godwin has been out, he's had 10 targets, 8 targets, 9 targets. And that's the most we've seen him be involved. He had 2 100 receiving yard games with Chris Godwin out, a touchdown in all 3 of those performances. He became the focal point at that time. So I don't know, necessarily with the emergence of Rob Gronkowski and the fact that he has been taking on a larger role. I don't know if we should necessarily expect 122 yards and a touchdown, but I do expect him to be more heavily involved this week. But if he is, that is my moment where I'm going to go ahead and sell high, even higher than I apparently could, because I had no idea he had this much trading value. But I'll wait for this week. I'll hold him. I won't drop him anymore. But I will hold him, and he will be off my roster by Wednesday of next week.
Man, so this is great. Kate, this might be, though, your opportunity to, right now, sell super high on Mike Evans. Can you imagine? I mean, people freaked out about dropping him. Now they're like, first of all, your Twitter mentions are going to be horrible, right? Because people are just going to be out there being like, horrible. Well, they're just going to get worse because people are going to be like, what about this? As if you should have foreseen the fact that nobody had any idea that Chris Godwin, coming off a great game, had fractured his finger and would now be out against the Giants.
I do have X-ray vision. I should have utilized it to look a little bit more closely. But you know what? I think this is just fantasy football is so fun and frustrating, but this is literally we're in redraft mode. I need to win my leagues now, so Mike Evans, he'll probably help me win my leagues this week. Moving forward, I'm not going to trust that. He hasn't had a bye yet. He's got a week 13 bye. That could be a critical week for you. If you haven't already solidified your playoffs, if your playoffs don't start week 13, that's a critical week. So you're not going to have him in one of the most crucial games. But do you really want to play Russian roulette as soon as Antonio Brown jumps into the mix week 9? Because I don't.
Yeah, I hate this entire situation now, and I hate that this
is. Because you agree. I know, and I had a lot of people in my mentions telling me that Mike Evans is the wide receiver 20, but that doesn't mean that he's actually the wide receiver 20.
No,
total
that's
points,
wrong, Kate.
yes.
No, that's wrong. That's wrong. Whatever their total points are, that's all you need to look at. What was their total points to this point?
Yes.
That's where they should be ranked rest of season. That's how you do fantasy football, don't you? Isn't that what it is? I loved it, though.
That's the rule.
I loved it, though, Kate. I really did, because of course, I did see that tweet. I thought it was great. I'm not dropping Mike Evans if I rostered him anywhere, which I don't, by the way. But if I did, I wouldn't be dropping him. But I still loved it. I loved the take, and I loved the thought process behind it. Again, I wasn't there, and now people are going to even go crazy even more because he's going to be ranked wherever he is this week. Okay, this has basically become the Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, Chris Godwin show. But Yates, go ahead now that you have the benefit of this information before you really even got going into it. Talk about Mike Evans. How do you view him now?
Yeah, I think, like Kate said, he's going to have immediate impact this week against the Giants. I mean, Monday Night Football, the Buccaneers are absolutely just going to stomp the Giants into the ground. They're favored by 10.5. Yeah, get that up to 16. Anyway, so with Mike Evans, yeah, he absolutely belongs in your starting lineup next week. But then with the news that Chris Godwin is out, but then sell. Get him off your roster, get him out, because so Dan, we did the start sit show last week, and my rankings process, I had Mike Evans at 32 overall, and ECR had him at 15 or 16, right. And I was like, dang it, I can't rank him there, but that's what my process says. And then what does he do last week? He puts up, 2 for 20 or something like that? I should have just kept it. So I'm out on Mike Evans, have been, and definitely now out with the news that Antonio Brown's coming into town. But of course, with the news that Chris Godwin is going to miss next week, you keep him for one more week, and then you get him off your roster.
And again, it's unclear whether or not it's going to be beyond that. It sounds a little bit dicey from the tweet that I'm reading on my phone as we're recording this. So we'll have to see how this goes. But obviously,
that was just unreal. That was the universe shaking things up and
Yes.
bringing some spice to the podcast.
I think
good
it's,
job, Universe.
I think it's good podcasting. Also, this is why you need to set Twitter alerts for beat writers and, of course, Adam Schefter and everything like that, just in case something breaks while you're hosting a podcast. Okay, I had a few more names, but this show that ran like 20 minutes longer than I expected. So let's just do one more name on the most traded list, because I do want to talk about his value going forward. Juju Smith-Schuster. Okay, season high in targets with 14. Season high in receptions with 9, season high in yards with 85 here. Are your concerns alleviated going forward here with Juju Smith-Schuster, Kate? And if so, what does that mean in terms of his rest of season value?
My concerns are not alleviated. I do think that, the fact that we had to see him absorb 14 targets in order for him to not even hit 100 receiving yards, not encouraging for me. I said last night, amongst all this Mike Evans stuff, sometimes like in a redraft league, especially, like knowing when your time to duck on a player and move on, that can be a season winning move, is just knowing, when is the time to stop playing a player, when is the time to move them for any sort of value. And I think if there's a person in your league who's excited about Juju's performance last week, great, but the Steelers are running a different kind of offense. It's not the Antonio Brown show anymore. They're not just funneling targets to one or two receivers. They have so many offensive weapons. And I mean, what we've seen, so far is just a general rotation of they're throwing to either the open man or they're scheming for one particular receiver. It's been a game of Russian roulette in terms of who do you start, who do you sit. There's just too much going on in that offense. So I'm out on Juju.
So ballpark for me what out actually means. Is he in like wide receiver 3 range? Is he beyond that? Where does he fall, generally speaking, and how you feel about him?
So I think he'll finish around wide receiver 3 range. I do expect that he's going to have some of these, weekly not necessarily weekly, but he's going to have some performances that, he's got the touchdown. He might finish as a wide receiver 1. But I just think he's going to be too inconsistent to roster at this point in your fantasy season. So if I can move him for, oh goodness, I'm trying to think of what my threshold is.
So, well, let me give you a trade that's offered. I assume you do this. This was Juju Smith-Schuster, again, in the same thing that I was talking about before in our trade search for who should I trade. Juju Smith-Schuster or Myles Gaskin going forward?
Myles Gaskin.
Yeah,
that's perfect.
So that's sort of somebody who's well above the line of Juju Smith-Schuster, right?
Yeah, that's a great threshold for me.
Yeah, and again, that's the lowest threshold that I've seen right now of him being asked, traded for in the last few weeks. So I think fantasy managers are pretty excited based on what, this is the type of guy, right? Guys who you have, sky high expectations for coming into the season, who finally have the game that makes you think, oh yeah, everything's fine. This is great. This is exactly
love to feel validated.
Exactly right. Confirmation bias. How about you, Yates? How do you view Juju going forward?
Yeah, I have Juju at 28 in my rest of season rankings for wide receiver. So he's still someone that you can still plug into your lineup. Again, we can't ignore 14 targets. And Deontay Johnson getting back onto the field certainly helped this offense get back into somewhat of a normal form. I mean, when Deontay Johnson's on the field, he's getting the targets. So Claypool, of course, just went back to being essentially irrelevant, a flex play at best. So I'm fine rostering Juju and plugging him into my lineup as a high-end wide receiver 3 week in and week out. But also, if you have the opportunity to sell high and get, max value like a Myles Gaskin and you're thin at running back, I would do that move.
Yeah, I would definitely do that move, and I have him right where you do, Yates, which is I have him 29th, so one spot lower. But yeah, that's what he is. He's like a mid-tier wide receiver 3 for me going forward. If you can get a guy like Gaskin, who, by the way, is an RB2, I assume that fantasy managers understand that at this point. And I get that Tua coming in maybe raises some uncertainty, but Myles Gaskin, considering the fact that they're either going to trade Jordan Howard or just keep him inactive, he is an RB2, and you should value him as such. And if you can do that for a guy who's like a mid-tier wide receiver 3, I would definitely do it. All right, let's get to some buy low, sell high. Kate, who's a buy low candidate for you at this stage?
Ooh, buy low. This is fun. I am going to buy low on Josh Jacobs. So he is a guy who weirdly enough, he was performing quite well through the beginning of the season, was seeing a monster truckload of touches. But then he had the bye week, and then, he had this outing against Tampa, the Tampa Bay defense is allowing 3 yards per carry, 3.0 yards per carry. That is the lowest, fewest yards per carry in the entire NFL. They're a top tier run defense, and he had a down week, and I think we should have expected the down week. I had him ranked quite low this week. And I think that you benefit tremendously from the fact that bye week preceded this down performance. Because for the manager who has Josh Jacobs, it feels like an eternity since Josh Jacobs last won you a week. I just think, his involvement as a receiver, I've been encouraged with that. His carry totals are just far too high to ignore, and I want that sort of volume on my roster any way, shape, or form.
And yeah, I mean, look, everything this week set up for failure for Jacobs, right? Because of the Bucs run defense, because of all their O-line issues, that was coming in. So it just was something where, yeah, you knew you had to start Josh Jacobs if you rostered him pretty much, but it was something where you had to kind of temper your expectations. And I completely agree. I think fantasy managers are probably going to be pretty frustrated if they roster him, because there hasn't been this monster sort of, they need this guaranteed RB1 performance every week from a guy who you are rostering in that range. And if you don't get it, people get a little nervous. So I really like that call. How about you, Yates? Who's a buy low for you?
Yeah, I love the Josh Jacobs call there. Another guy, and we talked about him earlier, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on him, but it's David Montgomery. I mean, again, it's based on the volume, and you're not going to feel super happy that you plugged in David Montgomery into your starting lineup every single week if you watch the game. If you wait and just watch, look at the box score, then that might be something where you feel a little bit better about it. But when we're talking about some of these running backs that, with the position right now and bye weeks and everything like that, if I can get David Montgomery, and I can for super cheap right now, I want a starting running back who's going to be getting the touches that he's getting.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is somebody who is almost always, on the most traded players list, because people who roster him are kind of desperate to move him, and they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I never get the big performance. But yeah, guys who get the guaranteed volume, as we talked about, are valuable. For me, I'll go with the different Steelers wide receiver than we talked about, and that's Chase Claypool. I think everyone is just going to be out now on Claypool because of the fact that, oh goodness, look what happens when Deontay Johnson comes back and when Juju Smith-Schuster is there. Claypool is irrelevant. But if you were watching that game, I mean, I think the Titans, like the rest of us, were kind of confused as to what are the Steelers going to do on offense with everybody healthy? We haven't seen this in a while. And it looked to me, I mean, I think Butler was on Claypool for much of the game. Mm-hmm. They kind of looked to be trying to take him away for a while, which is why I think you saw so many targets go to Deontay Johnson and Juju Smith-Schuster. But again, the big thing was when we talked about adding him that time on the waiver wire show, Yates, Tags was out on him because he was like, well, when they're all healthy, he's not going to replace James Washington. He has a bigger role. But he really did. He ran way more routes than James Washington did. And I think if he gets that role going forward, which there's absolutely no reason he shouldn't, he didn't run quite as many routes as Deontay Johnson or Juju Smith-Schuster, but he was up there. And I think if he does get that sort of usage, he's clearly ahead of James Washington. More often than not, he's going to produce. And I think fantasy managers are going to be like, I'm out. I'm completely out on this, because this was sort of the 1 week wonder, or, maybe 2 week that you look at. And now that they're all healthy, I'm out. But I think even with everybody healthy, I think he's going to carve out a role. Let's get to sell high. Kate, who's your sell high candidate?
I'm going to go ahead and sell high on Christian McCaffrey. I'm just full of hot, spicy takes. I know this isn't really a sell high, but I'm going to capitalize on the fact that he's returning to practice. Doesn't sound like he's going to be available for Thursday Night Football, but could see him back in Week 9. This is not a knock on Christian McCaffrey, because this is like trading away Christian McCaffrey in any league format is going to be a risk. But I'm looking at what we saw from top tier running backs last season with ankle injuries. We saw Saquon Barkley return, he was a fraction of himself for several games to follow. We had, Alvin Kamara. He was not performing in the way that we were hoping. I just think that, I don't think we're going to see Christian McCaffrey return to form just based off of our or general history with these types of injuries. Any lower body injury for these running backs is going to take a hit to the ceiling, and it wasn't an insignificant ankle sprain. So I think I'm going to sell high, capitalize on the excitement that he is returning to the lineup, and hope that fantasy managers expect him to return to full form. Like a trade that I would do, I did recently, traded Christian McCaffrey for James Robinson and Robert Woods. And I love that trade. Got two really solid pieces. And my league mates were very confused about why I would ever do this trade. And I think I'm not in any veto leagues, but I feel like it was like almost a veto situation, because they were all very confused by this. But you know what? I'm gonna get out from the Christian McCaffrey, because it's sort of like the Mike Evans thing. If you have Christian McCaffrey and Christian McCaffrey is active, you play Christian McCaffrey. I don't want to wait until he's fully healthy.
And real quick, Kate, do you expect that Mike Davis is going to have any sort of role once McCaffrey comes back? Or do you think they're going to give McCaffrey, assuming that he's, out there, of course, that they're just going to give him 100% of the running back touches, pretty much like they were?
So, I think we can look at the Panthers and just, say they're not contending for the 2020 season. And I don't think that they're under the guise that they are. You have to look at that and wonder, like, why would you throw Christian McCaffrey back, into that situation where he is carrying that significant of workload when Davis has been extremely productive? It's not like, you've gotten necessarily a significant downgrade at running back. He's actually been quite effective. So I don't understand, from a coaching, like a coaching aspect, and just, looking out for the longevity of this running back that you just paid millions and millions of dollars. I don't really see the point of giving him that full workload right off the bat. So I definitely have questions there.
All right, Yates, sell high candidate for you.
We're going to go DJ Moore yet again. DJ Moore, obviously coming off a huge game, 4 for 93 and 2 touchdowns. One of the touchdowns and the big play was broken coverage. He was able to get behind the defense, and Bridgewater has just been amazing from an NFL quarterback perspective. He's just looked phenomenal. So, but again, here's the reason why I'm selling high on DJ Moore. Week 3, 4 targets. Week 4, 6 targets. Week 5, 5 targets. Week 6, when Curtis Samuel was out, 11 targets. Week 7, 5 targets. He's not absorbing a ton of targets in this offense. He's actually falling behind Robbie Anderson and Curtis Samuel when they're both on the field. So if I can sell high on DJ Moore, who is held in extremely high regard in the fantasy community, if I can sell him super high and I can go get someone like Justin Jefferson or maybe even Allen Robinson at this point, a Terry McLaurin, like, I would absolutely be doing that trade.
Yeah, the targets just aren't there right now. And I think, depending on the types of leagues that you're in, fantasy managers don't always look at something that's pretty basic like targets. They just look at the production. So I agree with you there if people are buying high on DJ Moore. For me, sell high is Todd Gurley. I called this a while ago. This was sort of the time for Gurley to shine over the last few games. Carolina, Minnesota, Detroit. Now he gets Carolina. The schedule gets much tougher after that. You want to wait for after this game? Fine. Gets much tougher after that. Denver, bye. New Orleans. Running backs are gold right now. Running backs with guaranteed touches are gold. Running backs who accidentally score touchdowns are gold. So I think really, the guy can score touchdowns when he's not trying to. That's very difficult. So realistically, I think this is a good time to try to get a king's ransom for Gurley if you can. All right, let's go to rest of season risers and fallers. Let's move quick here so that we can get to a couple of listener mailbag questions. Kate, who's a running back who's rising in your rest of season rankings?
Ooh, a riser. I've got to go with Jonathan Taylor. He has been a guy who's sort of underperformed in terms of just, I think, fantasy manager expectations. Obviously, the talent is there, but I think we all expected him to come out and be on pace for 1,500 rushing yards by now, and he has not done that. But I like the schedule. I like I like the team. I like the offense, and I do think that they look their best when they are dedicating themselves to the run. So I'm sort of banking on, hopefully after that bye week, they come out and they really make that commitment to Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, I feel like it's been trending in the right direction now, especially of late. So even with Wilkins active, didn't really make that much of a difference. So I do like that call. How about you, Yates?
We got to talk about James Robinson. James Robinson right now is the RB3 in all of fantasy football, and he's 1 point in half PPR scoring behind Derrick Henry. Yep. Yes, he's played one more game, but yet, goodness. I mean, this is a guy who has come out of undrafted free agency with all my work in Dynasty and scouting. I didn't even scout James Robinson. He was that far down the list here. So he has just emerged and become one of these guys that you can plug into your lineup. The Jaguars, Dan.
Thank you.
Absolutely just leaned on him this past game, gave him a ton of work. So at this point, why is James Robinson still being viewed outside of a top 12 running back? I've got him at 9 right now, and I can make the case to move him above Ezekiel Elliott.
And where was he?
I would love that. I think that's a great call.
Okay, so you guys, hold on. So Kate, you will trade Zeke for James Robinson. Yates, you're not quite there yet, or you're maybe there?
They're back to back. I've got Zeke at 8 and Robinson at 9, so I'm fine making that trade.
Yeah. So I always, after this, he wasn't a riser for me this week because he had already risen. He was already an RB1 coming into this week because, I think, you take a different name and you put it on James Robinson and people are in love with him.
Right.
So, but I do a bigger sweep after this podcast, the rest of season rankings. Right now he's 11, but I could see him pushing to 9. It's really tough. I mean, when you get to that range, again, you're talking about Josh Jacobs and Jonathan Taylor. It's tough. But he's an RB1 for sure. Zero doubts. For me, a couple of lower end guys, Leonard Fournette, obviously because he was kind of forgotten, came back, showed he was healthy, outperformed Ronald Jones. He moved from 43 to 34. And Antonio Gibson, who kind of ping-pongs between like 20 and 25 in my rankings. Now he's ping-ponging up, and he went from 25 to 20. Let's go to an RB faller here for you, Kate, who's falling. Zeke, I assume, is on all of our lists, but who do you got?
He certainly is. I think we got to go with Devin Singletary.
Yes.
I was a big Zach Moss fan heading into the season, and I think that this past week we saw a healthy Zach Moss, and we saw basically them split the snaps. And I think that both of these guys, whether or not we see Zach Moss come to fruition, as I have so long hoped, I do think that they are going to just, kind of kill each other's fantasy values. I expect them to continue to, split snaps. And I think that, with all of these option plays that Allen is running, he's keeping all of them. So they're not giving their ball to the running backs quite as much as I would like. I think that we have to expect that Singletary is going to be sort of difficult to play in the weeks to come.
Yep. How about you, Yates?
Zeke, obviously. For me, Singletary was already down. I was off of him to begin even this season. So he's just been extremely ineffective. With Zeke, I got to go with Zeke, though. I mean, moving from 3 in my rankings 2 weeks ago to 5 last week to 8 now, I mean, I don't want any part of this offense.
Yeah, both
he
those
does
guys
not look like the same player, and it's been tough to sit back and actually watch
the offensive line has to play a huge role in that, though.
Yeah,
it does. Are you guys concerned about his fumbling problems at all?
Oh yeah, of course.
I don't know. I don't know what you do with this where suddenly somebody is fumbling. Is he just in his own head? I mean, what? I don't really know what.
He has the fumblies.
Yeah, he's got the fumblies. We've all had it. I mean, I drop, my cereal all the time on the floor when I'm trying to, make some breakfast. But I don't know. It's weird. I have moved him down like you, and I think we all have the same concerns. Only other guy for me was Ronald Jones. Again, I kind of bought into the whole maybe this is actually for real, but I'm not. Again, not crazy, but he was 17 in my rest of season rankings. He's fallen down to 23. Let's go to wide receiver riser, Kate.
Ooh, wide receivers. I'm going to have to roll with Terry McLaurin. I think he's a guy that I've been high on, but I think we're just getting to the point where we've seen the game script is just always perfect. Terry McLaurin was one of 3 wide receivers to have gained over 100 receiving yards when the team was down by 17 or more points. Yeah, Washington is not, they might come away with the division, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to need to throw the ball. We've seen him produce with Dwayne Haskins. We've seen it with Kyle Allen. I think we just have to expect this production, regardless of the tumultuous atmosphere in Washington, which was sort of my biggest concern for him. But he's just a lock. He's such a solid wide receiver, solid floor, high ceiling.
Yeah, McLaurin was my number one guy as well. He moved from 22 in my rest of season rankings to 16. He'll probably end up a spot or two higher when I'm done doing my sweep later today. How about you, Yates? Who's your guy?
I'm going to go Deontay Johnson because he had been someone that with Claypool's emergence, with Juju kind of and with his injuries, he had just kind of fallen down my rankings. He's right back up to where I had him previously. Going into the season, I was buying in on Deontay Johnson. So for me, he's at 24 right now. I can make the case that he should be higher than that.
That's funny because I had him 39th coming into the week. He's now 24th as well. So I am in agreement with you there. Those were my top two guys. Let's go to a wide receiver faller. Start with you, Kate.
This is a guy that's been just sort of continually falling for me, and now he's officially fallen off my map entirely. I have been hoping and praying for the Julian Edelman emergence. I really did not see this sort of giant trajectory downward. I just did not picture that because Cam Newton is a capable quarterback. He is a capable passer. I know he gets it done with his legs, but he's capable of throwing a ball. We've seen him make receivers relevant before. So I didn't foresee that as being a major issue, but we've seen Edelman pop up on the injury report each week. He has had 6 targets, 6 targets, 6 targets. He has caught 2 balls, 3 balls, 2 balls. He's not going to be a thing this year. I think I need to make my peace and move on entirely because this Patriots offense is more disastrous than I think we could have even projected.
Yeah, Kate, you are me 2 weeks ago. So I was sort of like coming to because I loved Edelman. I loved it. And I was like, what?
And he was being drafted so late. He was such a value for me. And you know what? It did. It took me a little too long to come around on it. But
No. I don't even think necessarily was. It was just much more of every time I tried to rank him rest of season, I was like, there's just no way I would prefer Edelman. Like I'd prefer this guy to Edelman, and it sounds disgusting, but so I just kept pushing him down and down and down, and yeah, he's entirely off the radar for me. Go ahead, Yates. Who's your wide receiver faller?
CeeDee Lamb, going from a mid-range wide receiver 2 down to a low-end wide receiver 3 in this offense. Yep. I mean, like you said, Dan, every time you look at your rest of season rankings, you want to just keep pushing the Cowboys receivers down. So yeah, he's fallen pretty far.
Yeah, me too. He's actually right now just outside of wide receiver 3 range, and it feels so horrible to say that. But all Cowboys receivers, even Amari Cooper, who hasn't gone that far because he has still gotten the targets and he has still produced, they're just all falling down. Yep. So that's kind of where I am. Let's skip the QBs and tight ends because usually guys don't move all that much going in, and some of them are covered by the listener mailbag question. It's getting a little late because of the whole craziness with Chris Godwin. So let me ask a couple of listener mailbag questions. Kate from @MP Talks asks, would you trade Nick Chubb to get James Robinson?
Absolutely. 100%.
Yates.
I would.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kate. Yes. I didn't mean to cut you off. No, bad hosting.
No,
Go ahead,
that's
okay.
Kate. I just got so excited. I love this trade. Please do that.
Okay, Yates.
Yeah, I would. Nick Chubb is supposed to be coming back after his after week 9 or week 9. I can't remember off the top of my head. But so he's close to coming back.
Week 9 they have a bye yet. So
yeah, but I mean James Robinson, the way I just talked about him, go get him.
Yes, James Robinson. I agree. Pretty much everybody asked what would you trade Zeke for right now? We just said the James Robinson trade is one that we would be happy to make. But Kate, let me ask. Let's put like an actual value on it because like 50 people asked. Give me like a running back. Obviously Robinson, where is Zeke, generally speaking, in your range? Give me a wide receiver. Give me a running back. You're like, yeah, that's somebody who I'd swap Zeke for at this point.
I'm all about this James Robinson. If I'm going to go look through all my redraft leagues, see if I have any leagues where I have Zeke and I do not have James Robinson, because I'm going to go throw some offers out. At this point, I think I think that's a good threshold for the running back position. As far as wide receivers go, if I could spin him for like a Terry McLaurin, something in that sort of range, maybe a Keenan Allen, who I think has been, sort of underrated, but has just come out to be a complete monster with Justin Herbert under center. I would make both of those moves.
All right, this one is for Yates to start off with. Turpin Moose asks, are you worried, Yates, about Cam Newton?
Yeah, definitely worried. I mean, just the way that he's looked throwing the ball recently has not. How could you not watch that and not be concerned? So he's definitely down, moving down my rest of season rankings. He's someone that I wrote up the game for the Patriots this upcoming week in my weekly article already, and I said, he's someone that he's a high-end QB2 this week. I expect them to try to get his confidence back, get him moving on the ground, which could inflate his fantasy value, but he's definitely a risky play right now.
How about you, Kate?
I think he is a risky play, but I'm encouraged by the fact that we had Bill Belichick come out pretty quickly and say he's our guy. I don't think they have a lot of other viable options here, but Cam Newton's a guy that if they can get him going on the ground, he will always have top 10 upside. Is he risky? Yes, but I think if he's if I can't get a Justin Herbert, or I think he's a fine option. He's a fringe QB1 for me still rest of season.
All right, last couple here. Kennedy Tyre asks Kate, would you give up James Conner and A.J. Brown to get Davante Adams?
I don't know that I would. It's really, that's a super close trend, especially considering Davante Adams somehow on pace for even more targets than I projected him for in the games where he's healthy. I think I saw he's on pace in his 3 healthy games for 200-something targets. Wild, absolutely wild. It's really hard to drop off with that volume, but James Conner is, a running back with weekly RB1 upside. That one's really close for me, and I say I'll probably hold. But God, if you have enough depth where you can afford to lose some of those pieces, do it. But if you need depth, I would hold on.
How about you, Yates?
I never recommend trading for a player that's coming off a monstrous game because their value is going to be sky high. And I don't know if you can come off a more monstrous game than the one that Adams is coming off of. So, yeah, I definitely would hold tight, especially because you're looking at the running back landscape right now, and you're saying that James Conner is a weekly RB1. So hold on to him.
Yeah, I agree. Too much to pay. I would love to add Davante Adams, but not for that price. Also, A.J. Brown is a complete stud, so Stop trying to get rid of him. Okay, 3 questions on Justin Herbert to finish us off. You can just give me a name. Don't need analysis. Justin Herbert or Big Ben going forward rest of season, Kate?
Herbert.
Yates?
I'll go Herbert because of his rushing upside.
I agree, Herbert as well. Matt Vanell, rest of season, Herbert or Aaron Rodgers? Kate?
Herbert.
Yates?
Aaron Rodgers.
I think I have Aaron Rodgers one spot ahead. And finally, Josh Bretthauer, Herbert or Lamar Jackson? Kate?
Lamar Jackson.
There's the line for Kate. How about you, Yates?
Yeah, Lamar Jackson.
Yes, I agree with that as well. Let's not go too crazy here with Herbert. All right, that's it for today's show. Kate, I'm so glad that we were finally able to have you on. You were a wonderful guest. Remind everybody where they can find more of you and your outstanding work.
Absolutely. So you can find me on Twitter at FFBallblast. You can find all of my work and my team's work over at ballblastfootball.com. Just giving some fantasy advice. We try to keep things fun and spicy over there, but always back that spice up with killer analysis, as I displayed with my awesome Mike Evans take that I'm going to go have to... I think after we finish recording here, I'm going to have to go issue a formal apology tweet or some kind of white flag that I can wave for at least the coming week to calm our Twitter followers there.
Yeah, Kate's analysis is really, it's fantastic. Everybody should follow her on Twitter. There are spicy takes, and as she said correctly, they are always backed up by high-grade analysis. Yates and I are going to call it quits because we've got a live stream to do for the waiver wire coming up very shortly, and then we'll be back tomorrow with our Start Sit show. I will talk to you then.
Thank you for tuning into the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to tell us what you think in the comments section below. And while you're there, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons so you can stay up to date on all of our future content.